rather be than right here, right now, tuning in to Bill's Central Radio.
Buffalo Bills, 2013, fresh new faces, each Emmanuel on scene, CJ and Fred are back, a strong round attack, Stevie Johnson at receiver, makes us all believe it's Mario Marcel, our D-line personnel, Bird and Gilmore, better shut the door, but they need the 12th man, and that's every single fan, so this is a network to listen to the expert, it's Bills Mafia, Chris Brown and Dale Reid, week in, week out, satisfaction guaranteed, every time out a new guest on the show, putting on for the fans of Buffalo. No subscription. This is for free. It's Bills Central Radio on PFC.
ESPN NFL insider John Clayton joins us now on SportsCenter. John, this comes somewhat of a surprise. E.J. Manuel good in the game last night. What can you tell us about Manuel and that MRI?
Well, it just tells you that now what you're seeing is how quickly things can change. And we saw it a couple weeks ago with Mark Sanchez and the injury that happened to a quarterback for the New York Jets, and now we see the same thing happen. E.J. Manuel had opened up a big lead, a huge lead on Kevin Kolb, and all of a sudden it looked like he was all set to, within a couple weeks, to be named the starting quarterback. Now he's got swelling in the knee. He had a little bit of a procedure, and they're shutting him down for the last two preseason games. And that doesn't take him out of the mix as a starting quarterback, but what it does, it gives Kevin Kolb every opportunity now in the final two preseason games to catch up and then try to do the best he can to at least regain or gain that starting job. So it's a mess right now. I guess you could say the team that had a quarterback in Kevin Kolb that got tackled by a rubber mat now has a quarterback who had the lead at the quarterback job that had a knee procedure and is now out for the next two games.
And this would be at the point where I would introduce everybody to Bill Central Radio, myself, and Dell, but I'm a little depressed today, Dell, and I'm not sure after hearing that bit if it makes me feel any better, but definitely not what I wanted to hear over the weekend as far as E.J. Manuel goes.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly what we wanted to wake up to hear. It was funny, too. Like, I was gardening on Saturday morning, and I'm out there, and I've got, I listen to music or podcasts while I'm doing that because gardening is really boring. And I just felt like motivated I was so jazzed about the game the previous night, so I just hopped on Twitter and just wrote, "Go Bills." I was excited, and then an hour later, or whatever it was, my phone buzzes or whatever. Somehow I forgot how I got notified of it, because I don't know if the Bills sent a text out or not. And it says, E.J. Manuel, whatever it was, he's going to miss the rest of the preseason. I was like, aw. But you know what? Stevie Johnson, they said he was going to miss the rest of the preseason, and now he's out there practicing, and he's going to play on Saturday afternoon against the Redskins. So who knows what's going to happen. This is the optimistic Dell. I know that's probably the primary one anyways, but this is probably all just coaches saying that it's going to be a long time. He comes back, hey, he came back early. So who knows?
Yeah, exactly. You never know in the situation, and I'd rather have it now than midway through the season where you'd have to miss, 4 or 5 weeks or something if something were to go wrong and tweak it a little more or something like that. So get it done now, get it out of the way, and we'll deal with week one as it approaches. But as far as today goes, on the show, we'll have a special guest. We have Carl Pfeiffer is going to join us today, and then Del and myself are going to break down a little bit of transactions that happened for the Bills over the weekend as far as releases and anybody who got released today. And then also we'll talk a little bit about the game. So stay right tuned, and we will have our first guest on the show in Carl right after the break.
What's up? This is Arthur Moats, number 52 of the Buffalo Bills, and you're listening to Bills Central Podcast on Pro Football Central. Go Bills.
And we're back on Bill Central Radio. We have our first guest of the show and our only guest on the show today. We have Carl Pfeiffer. He's a writer for Pro Football Central, as well as Queen City Sports, as well as BuffaloSomeday.com. And he is also a writer of the book Someday. Thanks for joining us today, Carl.
Good. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Sure, not a problem. We're doing fine. Thanks for asking. Well, we'll start off and have you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and where you're at today.
Well, I'm originally from Western New York. I was born in Buffalo, and I was raised in a small town outside of Rochester, New York. And I've been a lifelong Bills fan. I've been a diehard Bills fan since 1977. I went to my first game in 1972. I graduated from high school in 1983, and then I joined the Army, so I left the area for a while, even though I was able to spend 7 years of my Army career in Buffalo in the early 90s, which coincided with the Super Bowl years. So that was a great time to be living in Buffalo. And then in 2009, I retired from the Army and took a civilian job down in Florida, and I live outside of Tampa, Florida now. And once I retired from the Army, I had some time on my hands, so I've written a couple books. And my most recent book was about being a lifelong fan of the Bills.
Okay. Well, you touched on the book a little bit. Let's ask a question or two about it a little. What's the background on the book, and what made you, so to speak, put ink to paper as far as writing a book about the Bills?
Well, the book is about being a fan of the Bills. And what I did is I took the conversations that I've been having since 1977 about the Bills and put them, into a book. And what I did is, if you're a Bills fan, we've got the great history, especially the Marv Levy, Bill Polian, and Jim Kelly years of the 4 Super Bowls. And we love talking about those great games, but ultimately what we get back to are the heartbreaking losses in Bills history. And so what I did is I structured this book about the Bills' history around 8 of what I consider to be the most heartbreaking losses in franchise history. Some of them are very well known, obviously, like Super Bowl 25. Some of them are less well known because I structured those stories about some things that were going on in my own life. So they were more heartbreaking to me than probably the average fan. The premise of the book is you and I are just sitting down in a bar, and we discover that we're Bills fans, and we just start talking about the Bills. And, of course, we're going to talk about the Super Bowls. We're going to talk about the comeback game. We're going to talk about killing the Raiders in the AFC Championship game. But then, of course, the conversation is going to turn to the fact that we still haven't hoisted the Lombardi Trophy. And it gets to the losses that we've had throughout the course of the franchise history. And then the reason for the title Someday is because I think all of us in Buffalo believe that someday the Bills will win the Super Bowl. So that's the premise of the book.
Awesome, Carl. This is Reid from BillsMafia.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time.
No, I'm glad to do it.
Yeah, thanks. You've seen a lot of Bills history in your time. You said, die hard since 77, and since, 72 is when you went to your first game. What's been your greatest moment of being a fan up to this point?
Well, I've had a couple. I think the greatest experience I had is I was at the AFC Championship game when the Bills beat the Broncos. If you recall that game, that was when Carlton Bailey intercepted Elway, ran it in for a touchdown. We won the game 10-7, and we went to Super Bowl 26. I was at that game. That was probably the most significant game that I ever attended. I think my fondest memory of the Bills is when we beat the Raiders to go to the first Super Bowl, because for me, in the generation that I'm from, we had experienced, especially in the 70s and in the mid-80s, so much losing. And in the 70s, the Super Bowls seemed to rotate between the Steelers, the Cowboys, and the Raiders, and pretty much nobody else. So I just remember sitting back after that Raider game going, I cannot believe that the Buffalo Bills are actually going to the Super Bowl. So I just remember after that just killing the Raiders, thinking, my God, we are finally going to the Super Bowl. So those are probably my 2 fondest memories. Yeah, I was born in 75, so I didn't have enough backstory when they won that game against the Raiders. But having grown up as a kid, knowing the 2-14 back-to-back teams, and not really understanding all that goes along with that and everything. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That, oh my goodness, that my team is going to the Super Bowl. That's fun to remember and think about. Now, like you just said a few moments ago, the conversation eventually turns to the Super Bowls themselves and the performances that went on during them. So we all know what your worst moment is, I'm sure. So let's go with, what's your second worst moment as a Bills fan? Well, first one obviously is wide right. I think the second, because
you said it. I was trying to get you not to say it.
In the book, only 2 of the Super Bowls actually rate my top 8. And the reason why it's not a top 10 is I just couldn't decide amongst all the other heartbreak to get to 10, so I just left it at 8. But 2 of the Super Bowls, the Redskins loss and the first Cowboys loss, don't make it as a heartbreaking loss because they just got destroyed. They got dominated. The game was over at halftime. The last Super Bowl is probably the second most heartbreaking because if you recall that game, the Bills were winning at halftime. And they had, and for a half of football, they had played a perfect game. And I tell the story in the book about standing there at halftime with my younger brother and my father, and we're actually saying, I looked at my father and said, we're actually winning this game. Almost in stunned disbelief. And thinking that, the Bills are playing the perfect game like the Giants had played 3 years earlier. We're going to be the Giants this time. We're going to be the ones that stun the world and beat the Cowboys. And I was absolutely convinced of it. And then if you recall the way the second half started, we got the ball back and we were moving it a little bit. And then, of course, Leon slapped the ball out of Thurman's hands, and the rest is history in that game. So I just remember sitting there as the Bills were kind of inching down the field in the second half going, man, if we just score here, we kind of got this thing. And then, of course, the fumble happened, and I just remembered it. And then you knew, even though the game was just tied at that point, you just knew, well, now the Cowboys are going to just roll this thing, and that's exactly what they did. And I just remember slumping in my chair and going, we had this thing for the taking, and we just let it go. So that's probably the second most heartbreaking game in Bills history for me.
Oh, I feel it in my chest right now. I'm just saying that to for respect.
I'm not trying to bring everybody down either,
Yeah, I remember that game specifically in terms of just the air being let out of the entire team after that fumble and the touchdown. And you talk about slumping over in your chair. I remember Thurman Thomas and the rest of the team, especially Thurman, that sticks with me because they had the camera on him and everything, just slumped over with his head in his hands or just looking off into the distance. And I remember thinking, like, oh, come on, there's still so much more football to go. But with the history of the losses and everything up to that point, the game was over just shortly after halftime. All right, enough of that. Enough of the past.
Hey,
Let me say
something about the book. The book is meant to be very funny. I tell a number of very funny stories in it. And like I said, it's you and I are sitting at a bar, and we're just having a beer, and we're talking about the Bills. And I will say, not to give the book away, but the book ends very hopeful because that's what the title means. Is, hey, someday we're going to see our team win the Super Bowl. So it's not all depressing.
Yeah, no, that's the name of the book, Someday, right? So let's move on to the someday part. And what we're going to have to go through to get to someday is where we're at right now. So let's talk about the current squad a little bit. What are your thoughts about what they've done so far? They've really flipped this thing around. Tell us what you think about the coaches and maybe some of the players that have been getting news over the past several games, and just let us know your thoughts on it.
Well, I really like what I would call the culture shift in the team. I like the coaching staff. I like the hire. I like the Doug Marrone hire in the off season because, being from Western New York, I follow Syracuse sports pretty well, and I thought what he did at Syracuse was just a very, very good coaching job. If you recall, he took a program that was dying and resurrected it. So I think a lot of what he had to do at Syracuse is going to translate to Buffalo, and I think we're starting to see that. I think there's a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of creative ideas. And I think the coaching staff is getting the players to buy in. I also would say over the last few years we've started to stockpile some talent that we're now from a talent standpoint we're no longer a doormat. I mean we've got some players on both sides of the ball that could be going into that part of their career where they become Pro Bowlers or very good players. Guys like Eric Wood if he can stay healthy, Cordy Glenn, Stevie Johnson. I think C.J. Spiller is the best tailback in the AFC. I think Marcel Darius is going to show why we made him the third pick in the draft. So on both sides of Stephon Gilmore, I think could be a shutdown corner. So we've got some ability. We've closed the ability gap with some of the other teams in the East and in the AFC. So I'm very excited where we are with the team. Again, obviously the huge question mark is what kind of quarterback play are we going to get? I was thrilled with the first two games for EJ, and then, of course, we had the knee injury. I'm actually going to write an article about Cobb today about him getting another opportunity to show that possibly he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. But I'm excited.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of good reasons to be excited. Now, I'm going to nail you down to one player. A lot of times we tell people to, pick one for the offense, pick one for the defense. I'm going to give you one player here that you think is going to have the biggest impact for this team on either side of the ball. Who do you think is going to step up and you really, be the guy for 2013?
I have written repeatedly, I've said repeatedly that this season I think starts and stops with how we use C.J. Spiller and what kind of season he has. I think we will have a competitive season if he's running for 1,800 yards and rushing for a dozen or so touchdowns. And I think that he's got the potential to be, like I said, the best tailback, best running back in the AFC. And, all the fantasy folks I've told them right after Adrian Peterson, he's the guy you need to draft. So I will say the linchpin to the Bills season is how C.J. Spiller's used and how he performs.
Absolutely. We're definitely hoping for a big season from C.J. Spiller at this point. Now, you had mentioned Kevin Cobb on the previous question there. Wanted to get your thoughts on, as far as the situation going on with Manuel. We all know he had a little minor procedure on his knee the other day. Who do you think is going to come out, be the starter week one, with EJ having to rest here for a week or so, not knowing what the prognosis is as far as the injury goes and when he's going to be back into practice and everything. And, Marone kind of nailing it down saying it's very, very minor and everything went well and hasn't ruled EJ out yet as far as week one. Who do you think is going to be under center at the Ralph come week one?
If you're going to pick, I don't know, but I guess I would have to say probably Kevin Cobb at this point. I think that EJ was showing some flashes, clearly showing some ability, but I think he really needed the preseason. However, let me just put an asterisk on that. I mean, if Cobb comes out and performs in the next two preseason games the way he did the first two drives against the Vikings, then I think we go right back to E.J. Manuel as soon as we can. I mean, I thought he was abysmal in the first two drives last game. And I thought he's had, again, I'm down in Florida, so I'm reading it and I'm talking to other people, but everything I've read and everything I've seen and heard, he's had pretty much a so-so camp. But I think right now, because of E.J.'s injury, it's his job to lose, I mean, Andy Reid once bet the farm on this guy, so he supposedly has some talent.
Okay. Interesting, very interesting. All right, last question here, and we tend to ask a lot of our guests that come on the show here. But if you have to nail it down, give us a prediction. What do you think will be the Buffalo Bills' record come the end of the season?
I think they got the ability to go 9-7, and I think with reasonable to decent quarterback play, they can go 10-6 in a very weak AFC East. Even though the Patriots still seem to be the class of the division, I don't think they're going to be nearly as daunting as they've been in the past. And I think the Jets and Miami are both going to have pretty lousy seasons, especially the Jets. So I think that the Bills conceivably could go 5-1 in the division, especially opening with New England and all the problems that they have. Steal a game opening day and be right there at the end of December at 9-7. Which might be good enough to get into the playoffs as the division winner.
All right, I like the optimism. Sounds good for us that are listening. Now, Carl, where can all of our listeners check you out on Twitter, and where can they locate your book someday if they want to take a look and purchase it?
On Twitter, I'm at Buffalo Someday is my Twitter handle. I also have a website, Buffalo Someday. My book just got released to Amazon, so if you just Google it on Amazon, you'll find it. It's also with my publisher, which is Lulu, which is LULU.com. But like I said, if you Google it on Amazon, it'll come right up.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank you again.
Football fans, check out the official T-shirt apparel shop for the Pro Football Central Radio Network. Check out BigFrog.com/Cincinnati. That's BigFrog.com/Cincinnati. You think it, we ink it. They have an awesome 24-hour turnaround time. You can also visit them at their fabulous store over at Anderson Town Center, 7426 Beachmont Avenue, Cincinnati, Ohio 45255. That's BigFrog.com/Cincinnati.
We're back here on Bills Central Radio. Just got off the line with our guest, Carl Pfeiffer. What do you think, Bill? You had some great optimism talking about the glory days and also the days that are ahead for the Bills line.
Yeah, I've been following him for a while and been reading some of his stuff that he's had on, Queen City Sports and his website, and now on PFC and everything. Good guy, and it was fun going down memory lane with him. It was a little rough listening to the bit about the Super Bowls, but it is what it is, and you got to own it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something for Bills to check out in coming days here. But let's talk a little bit about some recent transactions. The Bills let some players go, and most recently noted today the longest 10-year Bill, Ryan Liddell, to go today. What are your thoughts?
Well, the writing was on the wall. They invested a draft pick, and we know how much Buddy Nix loves his draft picks. I know he's not the GM anymore, but he oversaw the draft for 2013. We all know how valuable those draft picks are. So for them to do that, I mean, it was just almost a formality. And I like what Marone said today in his post-practice comments in terms of they wanted to cut him early so he has the chance to latch on with another team. So I'm pretty sure that Lindell hasn't kicked his last NFL field goal or extra point up to this point. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm right with you. The writing was on the wall. It was kind of on the wall last year a little bit. They wanted to test the waters and see how we would do as far as competition when John Potter was there. But I feel Hopkins was a better push for him as far as competition. Now, what did you think about the kids' game? You weren't able to attend that, were you?
No, I was not able to attend it, but I'm looking forward to the 29th when I get to go to see them play the Lions, bringing my kids for a substitute kids game. But I did watch it, and it was really awesome to watch. It was great. There's just, as we said after the Colts game, there's just so much speed on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. And one bad situation that came after the game was the situation with E.J. Manuel having a little lump on his knee. All the speculation going around on what it could possibly be. What are your thoughts? Do you think we should kind of rush him back, or see how things go and how Cobb plays out these next two games?
Well, like I said at the outset, I have a feeling that the Bills are just. I'm hoping the Bills are just playing coy here, and that it's not really a 4-week thing or whatever it was, 2 to 4 weeks. They were saying this morning, I think it was Jeremy White and Sal Capaccio on WGR in Buffalo, how practices are closed to the media, and that'll be very soon. So you never know. They might have a helmet on, Manuel, and he's out there running through the progressions because, he wasn't on crutches or anything. It sounds like it was something just like draining fluid from his knee or something. I'm no doctor, but I think that if he's ready, they're still going to start him. I don't know. Cobb we've seen him before. I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but I'm pretty sure that they just took the 1 off the jersey and changed the name, and we're back where we were under center with this guy. I don't know. I'm less than enthusiastic. We'll see what happens, but Manuel won the quarterback competition before halftime on Friday, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, and absolutely. And I think the third quarter solidified that, and he just came out with an unfortunate situation afterwards. But personally, I still think he's going to be the Week 1 starter based on the severity of how Morone's kind of downplaying everything, just putting it out there. But it'll be interesting to see. I just got a text here that Stevie Johnson's going to be playing in the Washington game. He's back from his hamstring injury. What are you looking to see from Stevie when he comes out of the game here on Saturday?
Well, what made me nervous about that was that he said his hamstring isn't fully healed, but he's going to play anyways. Hamstrings are temperamental. Just be careful, dude. I know it's the third game, and I know you got to get your timing in and, get some game action and all of that, but just be careful. That's all I'm looking for from Stevie is that he take care of that hammy so that it's ready for when the games count.
Absolutely. They say the third preseason game, as far as starters goes, will be their last tune-up before the regular season starts. Who are you looking to keep an eye out on?
In just in the dress rehearsal next week or this Saturday. I've really enjoyed the quote unquote exotic defense that Mike Pettin was running this past Friday. I'm looking to see some more of that. Jerry Hughes was lighting it up in his time on the field on Friday. I'm looking forward to see if he can do that again against the Redskins. The defense has just been fun to watch, man. I mean, so I don't know. That's what I'm looking for in terms of the defense. In terms of the offense, I want people. I mean, that's true for both sides of the ball, but like, I just want people to stay healthy. You know, C.J. Spiller should be put in bubble wrap and put on the shelf and just saved until week 1. We know that he's good. He had 7 months off. He showed up against the Colts in 2 plays, averaged 15 yards or whatever it was. We know he still got it, so he can probably take a couple weeks if he survived the 7 months with no game action. That's all I want. I'm kind of boring when it comes to preseason. I enjoy the game as it's happening, but like the Manuel thing just showed us, like, just stay healthy.
Yeah, that's all we can hope for at this point. You know, this late into the preseason, with the week 1 approaching against the Patriots, to stay healthy as possible. So it'll be interesting to watch how everybody comes out and performs on Saturday. Anything new going on at Bills Mafia lately?
Yeah, we it's kind of fun. If you didn't see a lot of publication on the blog over the weekend, that was because I had a couple family commitments, and the blog posts that were submitted I wasn't able to post in time. They're still up there, but I didn't tweet them out because they didn't really reflect the Manuel injury. But go check them out. Jeremy Pike and Jason Mack had some really good write-ups following the game. And then today we actually have a very interesting blog post courtesy of Robin Mundy at YO fan, BILZ fan on Twitter. She's a retired psychoanalyst or something like that, and so she really takes it to Nathaniel Hackett and kind of picks him apart based on some of his recent interviews and ends up with some really exciting results. So I really recommend you go read the latest blog post at BillsMafia.com. It's called Nathaniel Hackett, a Coach and Teacher Wise Beyond His Years. And one more plug, we have a brand new shirt that's available only through August 28th. As always, the profits are going to go to Roswell Park. There's ads for it all over the website. You can click on it, and it'll take you there, and you can order the shirt design.
All right. Well, sounds like some good stuff going on at BillsMafia.com once again this week. So definitely check that out, and we're all looking forward to the Washington Redskins game coming up this Saturday, and I'm sure all eyes and questions will be on the RG3 thing until the game finally starts, and after that we'll get to some good football with some guys trying to prove their availability and trying to make the rosters for both teams. So definitely something to check out. All right, well, sounds good. We will catch you all next week on Bills Central Radio.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.